All episodes of A Trial by Podcast are for informational and entertainment purposes only. Much to their parents' dismay, neither host is a lawyer, journalist, or investigator. Just two people with microphones and Wi-Fi. All actions discussed are alleged, and all parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. For the full legal mumbo-jumbo, check the show notes.
On February 2nd, 2008, 24-year-old real estate agent Lindsay Buziak was murdered inside a vacant home that she was showing to a couple posing as prospective buyers. Days earlier, a woman with an unplaceable accent had called her out of the blue, claiming that she and her husband urgently needed a $1 million home and they could close within days. Lindsay was excited about the opportunity, but also uneasy enough about the situation to ask her boyfriend, Jason Zailo, to wait nearby during the showing just to make sure everything was okay. Witnesses saw Lindsay take the couple inside the home, but she would not leave it alive. That evening, while Jason waited in his car down the street, and while Lindsay's BlackBerry butt-dialed an old acquaintance, Lindsay was brutally attacked inside the home, stabbed 40 times in the face, neck, and chest, for her body to be found by her boyfriend. Now, nothing was stolen, there was no sexual assault, and there was almost no forensic evidence left behind. And police believed whoever had done this had obviously done it before. To this day, no arrests have ever been made. This is the unsolved murder of Lindsay Buziak. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Kelsey. Welcome back to the podcast. It is just me today. If you're brand new to the podcast, I sometimes have guest hosts come on and I tell them the stories. But today, you just got me. And I actually am fresh off recording this week's Patreon episode, which is a deep dive on the Freemasons. Now, normally the Patreon bonus episodes, I do 2 a month. They're usually 30 to 35 minutes long. I just recorded for a really long time, so I think it's going to be a full-length episode. But if you want to listen ad-free to the normal episodes or you want access to the bonus episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon. The link is in the description of this episode in the show notes, so you can subscribe there. If you heard our episode we did, which was a normal standard episode on the murder, well, I say murder, the police say suicide, but the murder of Charles Morgan. Charles Morgan was a Freemason. So if you've heard that episode, that's kind of what inspired me to do this deep dive on the Freemasons. And I learned so much. It is actually crazy. I thought that a lot of these conspiracy stories about the Freemasons, I thought it was total crazy, batshit, tinfoil hat stuff. There is some real hard evidence of conspiracies happening with the Freemasons, of them, committing murders, of them trying to disrupt the government. Now, these are specific instances, cases. They may be one-offs, but I learned a lot. I thought it was really interesting. So you guys are welcome to check that out if you are so inclined. But today, we are telling a case that I think if you guys are big true crime listeners, watchers, you've probably heard of this case before, the murder of Lindsay Buziak. And this is an unsolved case. And for me, this is one of those cases that I truly feel like I have no idea what happened here. I think there's a lot of unsolved cases out there where it seems pretty obvious what happened and there's just not enough evidence to prove it. And therefore, they are technically unsolved, even though we all kind of feel like we know what happened. I don't think this is one of those, in my opinion. I think some of you are going to disagree. Some of you are going to feel very strongly about one theory or the other. But I think it is such a tragic story. And I feel so hard for her family because I think from what I've seen of their interviews, it seems like they feel similar to how I do, they really feel like they have no idea what happened here. And it's one of those cases where it's not just, there's no information, we just have no idea. There's so much. There are so many possibilities that seem like credible leads. And I think that's a really specific type of agony, and I really feel for this family. And I do think that this case is completely solvable. There's not a lot of forensic evidence, and we'll talk about that, but I think this is a case where someone knows something. Someone knows who did this, and they are not saying it, maybe because they are somehow connected tangentially, or this was a family member who they love, or whatever it may be. And it has been almost 20 years since this happened. And I think we need to keep telling this story, because maybe whoever knows something, for whatever reason they weren't coming forward, maybe they can come forward in the future. And I think if people know anything about this case and they know who did this, they probably are watching the shows about this case. They are probably listening to the podcast about this case because they want to know, what do other people know? What are other people saying about this? So on the very off chance that you are someone who knows something about what happened to Lindsay and you are listening to this very small independent podcast, I invite you to stay, hear the whole story again, be refreshed on this tragedy, and think on your life choices, because you have the opportunity to help this family. So let's talk about who Lindsay Buziak was. She was born on November 2nd, 1983 to Jeff and Evelyn Buziak. And she grew up with one younger sister, Sarah. And Sarah does do some interviews, and I just can't imagine losing your only sister. But Sarah is really a great sister. She is out there keeping Lindsay's story in the media and trying to fight for answers. And Sarah actually, in one interview with, I think it was with True Crime Daily, she tells the story of Lindsay. And Lindsay had actually created a Facebook page, or like a Facebook group, that was titled something along the lines of like, everyone who loves Sarah and thinks she's the absolute best and loves her as much as I do, and invited like all of Sarah's friends and stuff. I don't know if Sarah was like going through a hard time at the time or whatever, but she basically created this Facebook group all about people who love Sarah, to like give Sarah a little bit reminder of how great she is and how everybody loves her. And that's just the type of person Lindsay was. She was very thoughtful. She was a great sister. She was a great friend by all accounts. And this is really a tragic loss, not just for the family, but for the community, for people who worked with Lindsay, for everyone. Now, they lived primarily in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Her father actually worked in real estate. And if you don't know, Lindsay becomes a real estate agent. And by every account, from family, friends, colleagues, Lindsay was just the kind of person that people really gravitated towards. She was very friendly, very warm. She was popular. She was ambitious, and she was beautiful, which we know helps a little bit. She was the sort of 20-something who made friends very easily and kept them because she was a good friend. Now, she was small physically. She was 5'3" and around 99 pounds. Now, this is a detail that her father repeats publicly over and over again in the years since her murder. And not as an ode to petiteness, but as a way of underlining just how physically vulnerable Lindsay was. Now, people who knew her described her as someone who was still very much figuring out their 20s, figuring out building a career, testing out a serious relationship, deciding if that's the right path or the right relationship, trying to decide what kind of life you actually want, where you want to live. And I think most of us, if you have gotten past your early 20s, we probably all had that same phase. I know I did. Now, in 2006, at just 22 years old, Lindsay moved to Victoria, British Columbia, and she decided that she wanted to get into real estate, just like her dad. So she enrolled in a real estate tutoring course. I don't know if this was like the actual certification course or if it was just to help study, but it was something to further her education and get to the end goal. Now, it was in that course that she met a man named Jason Zailo. He was already a licensed mortgage broker, and the two hit it off really quickly. Now, I do want to note something. I did listen to Morbid's coverage of this case. I always listen to like a podcast or watch a show before I start diving into my own research, just to like get a nice overview of the story so I know, what information I'm looking for. And in Morbid's coverage, they say that it was actually Jason's brother, Ryan, that Lindsay had met in this real estate course. They say that she met Ryan. Ryan was kind of like maybe a little infatuated with Lindsay, and he recommended her to his mother, who we're going to see is very high up in a real estate company, that he recommended her for this job and got Lindsay this job. Now, I found that it was Jason who she met at this course. She does eventually date Jason. Jason becomes her boyfriend. So I don't know for certain, but that's what I've read from the primary sources. So I'm not trying to call Morbid out for being wrong, I'm just saying maybe I might be wrong and it might have been Ryan. But from the primary sources that I read, like the actual reporting, I read that it was Jason she met there. He's a licensed mortgage broker at the time. They hit it off quickly and they do start dating. And Jason introduces Lindsay to his mother, Shirley. Again, very high up in a real estate company, very successful real estate agent. And he recommends Lindsay for this job. Whether they started dating before Lindsay gets this job or after, it's not really clear to me on the timeline. But really, in the end, what you need to know is Lindsay met one of the Zailo brothers. One of them recommended her, and she found her way into the Remax Camden real estate office, working under Jason and Ryan's mother, Shirley Zailo. Again, very successful woman. She's one of the best-selling real estate agents in the Victoria market. She is very well-known, very successful, and wealthy because of it. Now, this was the mid-2000s. This was right before the global financial crisis, when the housing market was still climbing and agents who could land these million-dollar deals were making a lot of money, and they were making it quickly. Like, this was a great profession to be in at the time. Shirley had built her career at the top of that market, and Remax Camden was, by most accounts, a very serious, very well-regarded brokerage. It was an established name with a real track record of success. And because of this, the Zailos were a prominent family in the community, and again, wealthy. Now, for a junior agent, barely into her license, Lindsay getting to work alongside someone like Shirley wasn't very unusual on its own. You have to have some sort of mentorship. And a lot of the times in the real estate industry, from what I've read from the internet, because I don't know anyone who works in the real estate industry, but it sounds like mentorship through family and, family friends, like through family connections. It seems to be pretty common because it's an industry that's really built on reputations and referrals. So those relationships and that networking really, really matters if you want to be successful in this industry. Now, what made Lindsay's position a little more complicated than the normal family friend connections was that her mentor, her boyfriend, and her employer were all in effect the same family. It was all the Zailo family. There was no real separation between her professional life and her personal one. Now, by the time of her death in early 2008, Lindsay wasn't even 2 years into her license, but she was an ambitious junior agent and she was starting to build a name for herself in this really competitive field. However, that overlap of personal and professional lives, it was starting to cause some issues for her. From all accounts, Lindsay and Jason hit it off quickly. It was really head over heels, very fast, and they actually moved in together after just a few months of dating. It sounds like the first place they had together was in Victoria, but they eventually moved into a $1 million vacation home that was owned by Jason's mother, Shirley, who reportedly spent $70,000 renovating the home before the couple moved in. The home was a beautiful waterfront property located on Shawnigan Lake, and this was a rural area outside of Victoria itself. Now, while it was a beautiful home and I'm sure idyllic, it's reported that Lindsay was growing increasingly unhappy living out there. She was far away from her friends and family who were mostly clustered in Victoria itself, and she was just starting to feel kind of lonely and isolated. Now, on top of that, according to Lindsay's father, Jeff, Lindsay was also growing somewhat unhappy in her relationship with Jason. According to Jeff, Jason adored Lindsay, but he was, quote, overprotective, overpossessive, jealous, and that really bothered Lindsay, end quote. That's what Jeff told True Crime Daily. Lindsay eventually decided to move out of the Shawnigan Lake home and back to Victoria. She wanted to be closer to her friends, closer to work, closer to the people she loved. And it sounds like because of this, the couple did split up for a period, but Jason didn't want to lose her. He begged for her to come back. He agreed to relocate to Victoria with her, and the two ended up reconciling. In the fall of 2007, they moved into a condo in Victoria's Vic West neighborhood. This condo was also owned by Shirley, who again reportedly put tens of thousands of dollars into renovations for the couple. But I will say all of the renovation dollar amounts, they vary based on the source. So the actual amounts are uncertain, but I read a couple different places that it was $70,000 for the first home, which is crazy. Now, despite this reconciliation, it seems that Lindsay was still struggling with issues in the relationship by late 2007. By this point, she had been quietly telling friends that she was planning to leave Jason. But this wasn't a simple breakup. This wasn't just, hey, I don't think it's working out, we should probably part ways. Because it wasn't just Lindsay's romantic life that was entangled with Jason. It was almost every aspect of her life. His mother was her mentor and boss. She worked with Jason, and Shirley literally owned Lindsay's home. So again, breaking up with Jason didn't just mean leaving the relationship. It meant leaving the company that kicked off her career, leaving her mentor, and moving out of her home. She was going to have to rebuild her entire professional life somewhere else. And in a business that seems to be very much built on relationships and referrals, starting over and going out on your own isn't easy. Now, at the time, it seems that money was also tighter than her busy and socially active life made it seem to be. According to a letter reportedly written by a friend and later reviewed as a part of unsealed police documents, Lindsay was described as, quote, stressed about money, end quote, during this period of time. So on top of, all of these entanglements with the Zailo family, she is also like having to move out of your house when you are feeling like you don't have a lot of money. Very tough. And I think this helps explain why, when a caller offering a potential $1 million sale reached her, the size of that commission mattered enough to outweigh any sense of unease she may have had about the situation. It's that time of year where everyone is coming over. Cookouts, get-togethers, and people asking for water with ice. And I actually deeply care about what I'm handing my guests. I'm trying not to Julia Tofana anyone. If you know, you know. And that's the thing. I just moved into a new place. The tap water looks perfectly fine, smells perfectly fine, looks crystal clear. But that's the thing is, looks can be deceiving. Your water might look completely fine straight out of the tap, like crystal clear. But 3 out of 4 U.S. homes have toxic chemicals in their tap water. And guess what? You're not going to 3 out of 4 U.S. homes and seeing water that looks funky. It just looks like water. But just like Aqua Tofana, there are things in there that you can't see, smell, or taste. Your standard fridge filter or pitcher filter isn't catching most of them. So this summer, I've been running everything through AquaTrue. It sits right on my counter. There's no plumbing. There's no installation. You just have to plug it in and go. It's tested and certified to remove 84 contaminants using its patented 4-stage reverse osmosis system. So when someone asks for a glass of water at my new place, I feel good handing it to them. So if you're ready to make the switch, head to aquatrue.com and use promo code ATrialByPodcast for 20% off your purifier. That's AquaTrue, AQUATRU.com. Promo code ATrialByPodcast for 20% off. We are officially in the dog days of summer, which when you were a kid, that meant a lot of freedom. No school, no teachers, no homework, no nothing. But as an adult, that freedom is taken away from us, ripped from our hands, shred by shreds as we beg for it back. Meanwhile, it's 95 degrees out, and you're probably just dying for one day of freedom and a nice cold summer cocktail. Maybe a mojito, maybe a margarita if you're feeling spicy. But who could afford it in this economy? Especially when Big Wireless is charging you an arm and a leg for your wireless service. That's why summer is the perfect time to switch to Mint Mobile. With their summer sale, you can spend just $15 a month for high-speed data and coverage on the T-Mobile 5G network. Mint Mobile took what's wrong with wireless and made it right with premium wireless for just $15 a month, so you can free up those dollars for something a little more fun. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. So stop spending on wireless and spend on margaritas, if you so choose. Go to mintmobile.com/atrialbypodcast to switch. That's mintmobile.com/atrialbypodcast. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required, $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Includes up to 20 gigabytes hotspot. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. Now, on the morning of January 31st, 2008, Lindsay got a call from a woman who said that she and her husband urgently needed to buy a home. The caller said that she and her husband were from Vancouver, but they were relocating to Victoria and they needed to find a home urgently. They wanted something that was move-in ready with 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms minimum, plus a separate in-law suite for their live-in nanny. The woman said that they'd be in Victoria that upcoming weekend for 3 days, and they wanted to see options and actually make an offer on their favorite during those 3 days. Like they were ready to close on $1 million house. And this was a pretty tight, almost aggressive timeline for a home purchase. But with the woman's $1 million budget and the urgent need, it almost guaranteed a massive commission for Lindsay. Even in the moment, the opportunity seemed almost too good to be true. And Lindsay was a little bit suspicious of the caller. Now, Lindsay said that this woman had an accent that was unidentifiable. She didn't know what language or where this accent was from. And she did note afterward that she suspected that the woman may have been faking it. Like she was trying to do a specific accent, but couldn't quite nail it type of thing. While on the phone with the woman, Lindsay asked her how she had heard of Lindsay. Like, oh, how'd you hear about me? I'm getting this call from this woman I never met before. And the woman offered the name of an actual former client of Lindsay's as a referral, saying, oh, so-and-so referred me. And this made Lindsay feel a little more at ease about the situation because that made sense. She had worked with these people, they enjoyed the experience, and they passed on her name. Now, Lindsay did try to call that former client, like after getting this call. She just wanted to thank them for referring her to somebody. But the client was out of town and unreachable at the time. So Lindsay moved forward without ever, checking in with them. And this was a shame because if she had been able to reach them, they would have told her what they would later tell the police. They did not know this couple, and they never recommended Lindsay to any couple in their life, which makes you question, did the caller know that this former client that they named would be out of town and unreachable at the time? Or was that simply a tragic coincidence? When you hear the details of this story and how planned and thought out this murder was, I honestly, personally think that they somehow knew that these people were out of town and that they wouldn't be reachable. I don't think that these people were taking chances on anything. Now, despite feeling somewhat assured by the referral name, Lindsay still felt uneasy enough about the situation to raise the subject with both her father and her boyfriend, Jason. Her father, also in the real estate business, like I mentioned, he told her, I'm sure it's going to be fine, but just bring someone along with you just to make sure, just as an extra safety measure. Now, Jason encouraged her to take the meeting. Given the size of the potential commission, he knew that this was a great opportunity for Lindsay, and he offered to be the person to tag along just to make sure everything was okay. Now, Lindsay didn't want to look unprofessional, so the plan was for him to just sit outside the house in his car during the first showing so that, the client wouldn't be like, well, why is your boyfriend here? Now, as far as we know, Lindsay didn't tell anyone in her life the names of this couple. Like, we don't know what their names were or what they said their names were. She did take notes about the showing during one of the phone calls. They did find notes that she wrote down, but again, it did not include the couple's supposed name, whatever name they gave Lindsay. Now, Lindsay found a match for the caller's wish list at 1702 De Souza Place in Saanich. It was 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, listed at $964,000, just under their $1 million budget. The house was located in a cul-de-sac, and the cul-de-sac itself was under construction at the time. Like, this was a brand new neighborhood that was still being built. And the developer, Joe De Souza, was actually a business associate of Shirley Zailo's. And he had reportedly been on site supervising work there roughly an hour before Lindsay's murder. Now, that's a real coincidence of geography and this connection between the Zailo family and this guy who, was in the area leading up to the murder. And this is something that those who believe the Zailo family may have been involved in what happened to Lindsay, they lean on this pretty hard over the years. Like, well, they knew a lot about this neighborhood because they were friends with Joe De Souza, and, maybe De Souza was involved because he was there leading up to it. And I think it's totally fine to ask questions that we don't have the answers to. And I think it's important to do those things. But in my opinion, I think this fact alone, like him being in the area an hour before the murder, I do believe when looked at alone, it's pretty meaningless. Like, it's not really evidence of anything. Now, you could argue that with other evidence stacked on top of it, if there's other evidence pointing to this man or pointing to the Zailo family, and when you put it all together, this might, be an added little, and look at this, he was in the area. But I think, again, when you take it alone, it doesn't have much importance on its own. Now, D'Souza Place sat in Sainich's Gordon Head neighborhood. It was a quiet, upper-middle-class pocket of Greater Victoria known for new builds and, big family homes. It was not the kind of area where a violent crime would typically be anticipated by neighbors or by the agent doing the showing. This was a very safe area. Obviously, it's $1 million home. Now, the cul-de-sac itself was still being built out, and there were several lots under active construction, which meant unfamiliar vehicles and unfamiliar faces moving through the area on any given day. Like, they weren't going to go notice or draw attention because, again, there's people coming in and out all the time, as opposed to if you're in an established neighborhood and you know your neighbors, you guys have lived there for a long time, and you just see random people going in and out, you might clock that sort of thing, but not here. Now, the house that they were looking at itself, it was a vacant new build. So there was no previous owner. No one lived there at the time. There was no furniture, no occupants, nothing. The emptiness is part of what makes this case so specifically chilling. Whoever planned this didn't have to break in. They didn't need to work around a former homeowner. They didn't need to worry about neighbors glancing through the windows. A vacant show home is functionally a very controlled environment. And finding one that fit the buyer's stated criteria took Lindsay some real effort. She wasn't careless in finding this home. She did her job very well, and she was meeting their expectations. And the callers, whoever they were, they appear to have known that a good agent would do exactly that. And it makes you question, did they tailor this wish list in an attempt to guide Lindsay to picking a specific type of home for them to look at, to pick a new build because of their price point or whatever it may be? Was their wish list tailored in order to get a specific end result? And I think probably. And this also prompts another question for me. Did the caller know that Lindsay's real estate company had this relationship or tie to the builder in this area, Joe D'Souza? Were they specifically targeting this new neighborhood build? And those are questions we don't have the answers to. Now, the day of Lindsay's murder, Lindsay and Jason had a late lunch together that Saturday afternoon at a restaurant called Sauce. And their waitress did confirm this. She was a witness, and she was a good witness because she actually knew Lindsay and Jason. So it wasn't, there was no possible question of mistaken identity. According to the timeline, which is published by Lindsay's father online, the bill was paid at 4:24 p.m., and the two left separately. Now, Lindsay's believed to have gone home to change and get ready for the showing of this home, and she unlocked the lockbox at the D'Souza Place home at 5:29 p.m. And this is something about this lockbox, which is basically just holding the key to the home so the real estate agents can get in and out. I don't know, but it has a digital record that shows when she opened it, which is interesting. I didn't know they could do that. Now, Jason, meanwhile, drove to an auto shop to pick up his coworker after leaving lunch with Lindsay. And this coworker's name was Cohen. And we know that he did this because we can see him on surveillance footage placing him there. You can see him arriving at 4:29 p.m. Now, Cohen was a coworker, but he wasn't a close friend of Jason's. It's not like they were besties and spent so much time together. They were more acquaintances, and they had some shared interests like hockey. And I think this becomes important because Cohen is with Jason throughout this whole evening. And I think the fact that this is just his coworker and not his best friend, it does make Cohen's story a little bit more, it does make me more inclined to trust what Cohen is saying. And I don't really think that there are any questions about Cohen or that he's involved or lying or anything like that. All I mean is that he really wouldn't have a motivation to lie for Jason or anything like that, because obviously there are going to be questions about Jason being possibly involved in this. Now, the story of why Cohen and Jason were going out together that evening, it's not consistent. It's a little bit different. It varies based on reporting. One account says that Jason had invited him to dinner, and another account says that the plan was for them to go play hockey. Maybe they planned to do both. But what does seem consistent in the reporting is that Cohen was kind of on the fence about going. He's like, yeah, I don't know, man, whatever. But then Jason was like, oh, come on, kind of pushed him on it. And Cohen finally agreed to go. Now, the plan was for them to go to Lindsay's showing, and then when it was over, they were going to go do their outing, whatever it was, dinner, hockey, both, who knows. But according to Cohen, Jason didn't tell him this plan beforehand. Like, basically, Jason comes to pick him up. He gets in the car and he's like, oh, by the way, like, you know, my girlfriend's showing this out. She's like a little nervous about it. So we have to go, you know, until she's done and just make sure everything's cool. Now, they left the shop at 5:30, and Jason texted Lindsay that he'd be there in 10 or 15 minutes. Now, this showing was scheduled for 5:30, so he does arrive after the showing begins, which I think is very important. Now, she replied that she'd see him in a bit, and she had to go because, quote, the Mexicans are here, end quote. Now, because of the caller's accent that she couldn't place, Lindsay had started referring to the couple as the Mexicans. And my first thought was like, oh, Lindsay. But I'm wondering in other countries, like, does that sound offensive to you guys? Because it sounded like when I first read that, I was like, that kind of sounds like offensive. Like she's calling them the Mexicans with a negative connotation. And you know what? Lindsay has lost her life. So I'm not here to advise Lindsay, but I'm just like genuinely curious because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, what if it was like Americans? And she said the Americans are here. Like that wouldn't be offensive. So I'm like, am I just primed to think that is meant offensively because I live in the US, and unfortunately here in the US that calling people Mexicans is often paired with offensive statements because, you know, there's a lot of contention about the US-Mexico border, and like, so a lot of hateful people, you know, they're like, oh, the Mexicans, whatever. And so I guess my question is that inherently offensive, or am I a dick for assuming it's inherently offensive when she's just referring to someone's possible nationality? Like, I wouldn't be like, I might refer to people as like, oh, the Canadians, or oh, the Italians, you know, whatever. But I don't know. And I only bring up that question because a lot of the times when this story is discussed, people have that same reaction of like, ooh, yeah, she called them the Mexicans. And I'm like, well, maybe in Canada, it doesn't have that same like connotation when a white person says that, you know? I don't know. Now, around that time, witnesses in the cul-de-sac saw Lindsay greet a man and a woman near the back of her car. They then were like shaking hands and doing introductions and going into the house together. And it's really important to note that these witnesses who saw this, it was not Jason and Cohen. They're not named in any reporting, but these are independent third parties that are separate from this case as far as we know. But it definitely was not Jason and Cohen. So according to the witnesses, it looked like the couple was meeting Lindsay for the first time because they were shaking hands in a very professional manner. Like, it's not like, oh, this looked like people Lindsay recognized and she's like, oh my God, what are you doing here? Type of thing. Now, the woman who was presumably the female caller who had set this all up, she was blonde and she had short blonde hair and she was wearing a bright patterned pink, black, and white dress. And there's actually a photo of this dress. It may not be the exact dress, but the witnesses like picked this out saying that's what the dress looked like. It's described as being kind of out of style, even for 2008. Like it looks like more of like a 90s style. And it's like pretty professional looking, even though it has all these bright colors. So I will be posting a picture of it on the Instagram and Facebook if you want to check that out. Now, the description that they have of the man is not as detailed because the witnesses only saw the man from the back, so they didn't see the man's face. But they said that he was a white man with dark hair, and he was estimated to be around 6 feet tall, wearing a tan or beige jacket. Overall, they said that this couple was dressed very nicely. They looked very, very professional, classy, the type of people that you would imagine are buying $1 million home type of thing. Now, at 5:38 p.m., Jason sent another text to Lindsay saying just a couple minutes away. Lindsay never opened this text messages. And this is where records kind of split. Police and Dateline have both treated that 5:38 text message as the last message Lindsay ever received, or at least they've given that impression to me. Jason, in other interviews over the years, has said that he also sent a follow-up text asking if she was okay after she didn't respond. But investigators have never confirmed nor disputed this claim. So while they talk about this 5:38 text and then don't really mention any others, that doesn't necessarily mean that like Jason's lying about the other texts. They might just have thought it wasn't important. We just don't really know because investigators are keeping some of this information close to the chest. Now, it's believed that Lindsay took the couple inside and showed them the first floor first, and then took them upstairs. At roughly 5:41 p.m., Lindsay's BlackBerry placed an outgoing call. This is believed to be a pocket dial that happens during the attack. The call went to a friend that Lindsay hadn't spoken to in a long time, and it's unclear to me whether this went to their voicemail or if this is just what that person told police that they heard when they answered the phone. But basically, all that was heard is like muffling and shuffling. So there's no talking, there's no screaming or anything like that. But police believe that this call may have been made while she was being attacked because this was a BlackBerry. So this has physical buttons. So if it's in her pocket and she's being attacked or like thrown to the floor, they think that is when that call was accidentally made from her phone. It's also possible that Lindsay grabbed the phone in an attempt to call for help and didn't mean to call that person in particular. But I think this is unlikely because we're going to see there were no defensive wounds on Lindsay. So it's believed that she was really like surprised by the attack, did not see it coming. So if she didn't have time to defend herself, I don't think she had time to like try and call for help. Now, Lindsay was found in the master bedroom, and it actually sounds like she was kind of between the master bedroom and the master bathroom. And investigators believe that, she takes them into the master bedroom, and as she turns to walk into the bathroom to show them the bathroom, she was attacked from behind. Lindsay was stabbed 40 times, at least. And like I said, there were no defensive wounds. So it's believed that she did not see this attack coming. So again, police think that this happened when that call was made, right around 5:41 p.m. Jason and Cohen pulled into the cul-de-sac right around 5:45 p.m. So if police are right about the time of, number one, this is a large house, so I would think so, but maybe not. And we also know that she was surprised by the attack and, maybe was killed very quickly, didn't have a good opportunity. But especially if this happened before they get there, obviously they're not hearing anything. And it's just seeming very still and quiet. Now, for 9 years after the murders, the story that both men told consistently was that they saw silhouettes moving through the glass of the front door. So like they could see people inside, but they couldn't see like details about them because of this glass and it's nighttime outside. But it looked like there was a man standing near the front door. And they say this for 9 years. But years later, there are some police records that are released to the public that for a long time were kept private. And in some of those statements, there are descriptions from Jason saying that he saw a man walk out of the front door and then immediately turn back inside, go back inside, and close the door behind him. So maybe that was misrecorded by the police officer taking the statement. Maybe Jason's story did change. We don't really know. But either way, Cohen says, we could see people inside. We could see a man inside the front door. We couldn't see what he looked like or any details about him, but we saw someone inside. Now, Jason parked facing away from the house at first. He was just watching in his rear view mirror. Like he just kind of passed the house, parked on the side of the road, and they're just chilling. 10 minutes later at 5:55, he ended up moving the car to a spot along the road behind the property, a spot that, because of the patio fence, actually blocked his view of the house a lot more rather than improving the view. Like he didn't move the car to get a better view because this was a worse view. Now, a lot of people say this is suspicious, and maybe it is. But Jason has since explained the move as an attempt to not look like he was hovering. He didn't want to spook the prospective buyers when they came out, and he knew that the showing started around 5:30. So it does kind of make sense, like, okay, they don't know who you are. Maybe you don't want to look like, oh, there's just creeps lurking around this area sitting in their cars. And he knows, all right, they started at 5:30, it's 5:55. They're probably going to be done soon and come out. And as far as Jason and Cohen have seen, everything is normal. They're not hearing screams. They're not seeing people run from the house. Everything seems normal for the first 10 minutes they're there. So I feel like this is a decent, believable reason for moving the car. That makes some sense to me. Now, I'm not saying for sure that is why he moved the car, but I'm just saying, I think that's a reasonable explanation for this. Now, after about 20 minutes without hearing from Lindsay, this is 20 minutes total after arriving. So they get there around 5:45 p.m. 10 minutes later, they move the car, and then 10 more minutes go by and he's not hearing from Lindsay. And, Jason's family works in the real estate industry. Like, he knows about how long these sort of things should take. And according to Jason, he sent that additional text message that police have not reported to the media, but he says he sent another text message saying, are you okay, or is everything okay? And she still hadn't responded. So now he's starting to get like, okay, maybe we should go check. So Jason and Cohen go to the front door and it's locked. This is alarming. Why would the door be locked? There is no reason for a door to be locked during the showing. And again, remember, they saw a man standing. They could see him through the window at the very least. It sounds like there are some reports, possibly from Jason, that the man even walked out of the door and then walked back inside. And so did the man lock the door? And why is the man locking the door with Lindsay inside? Now, they peeked through the glass by the front door and they could see Lindsay's shoes sitting on the floor. Not alarming on its own, because agents do normally take their shoes off in a new home. They want to keep the floors clean. They want to keep everything looking pristine. But at this point, the locked door was enough for them to be nervous. They knew something bad was happening. Jason called his mother to ask if she had the code for the garage's electric keypad so they could get in through the garage. Because remember, even though the lockbox is out there and he could probably get the code to the lockbox, the key is not inside of it anymore because Lindsay used it to get into the house. Like, Lindsay probably had the key, I'm assuming. I didn't read anything specifically that it was found on her, found inside. I don't know where the key was, but I would assume it's not in the lockbox because you're going to use it when you leave after the showing to lock the door before you leave. So Jason asked Shirley, do you know the garage code? Shirley checks. She calls back. She's like, I don't have it. There's no garage code. We only have the lockbox code. And at 6:05 p.m., Jason calls 911. But they weren't waiting for the police to get there. They wanted to get inside that house. So they go around the back and they're thinking, and they peek over the fence and they can see that the back door is ajar. It's open. And Cohen actually ended up climbing the patio fence, and Jason was like below him, boosting him over it. This must have been a really tall, like, privacy fence, I'm guessing. And Cohen goes into the house through the back patio door, and he walks through the house to the front door and lets Jason in through the front door. From my understanding, the reasoning for Jason not going in through the patio door is because this fence was so tall, so it was really hard to get over without someone on the ground boosting you over. So Jason runs around to the front. Cohen meets him at the front door, lets him in, and it's presumed that the reason the back door was open in the first place was because the attackers had exited the home through the back door, through the patio door. Now, this makes you question, because remember, Jason and Cohen say they saw a man, through the glass. Possibly the man came out of the house for a second, went back in, shut the door behind him. So did they plan to leave through the front door, but then they see Jason and Cohen sitting in the car on the street. And so they go, oh, we're going to have to go out the back. So as soon as Cohen lets Jason in, they are pretty much running through the house calling Lindsay's name. And Jason specifically immediately runs upstairs. As soon as he enters the home, he runs upstairs to the master bedroom. And some people find this pretty suspicious because Lindsay was indeed killed in the master bedroom. And they say, how could he have known that Lindsay was upstairs? And I'm not saying it's not sus, but I do think it's important to note that the staircase was directly in front of the front door. So it's like when he lets you in, you kind of presume that he didn't see anything on the first floor. Now, this was probably a large house. Could he have seen, obviously he didn't go check in every room and every possible crevice, but I could see being like, all right, well, there's nothing down here because Cohen just walked through here. Let me run upstairs and see what's going on. However, with that being said, he reportedly did go straight to the master bedroom first. Did he do that because he knew Lindsay would be there? That's what some people question. In my opinion, I have no idea who did this to Lindsay. I don't think this is evidence of anything, though. If later on there's all this evidence coming forward that, it's Jason probably did it, yeah, this is suspicious on top of other evidence. But again, by itself, it doesn't, I don't know, it's not super convincing to me. A lot of people act like, oh shit, this shows he fucking did it. And I just don't think that is the case. And I should say, I'm going to mention it multiple times throughout the episode, but the Zailo family has been officially cleared by police. Police have come out and said the Zailo family was not involved in this. So I'm not accusing them of committing any crimes or being involved. However, a lot of people are. So we're going to discuss those theories. And look, I will say there's a lot of unanswered questions in this case that I think we need to be asking. That's all I'll say. Now, of course, Jason does find Lindsay in the master suite. He did attempt to give her CPR, though he has said in various interviews since that her body already felt cold to the touch. This is interesting because the police believe that she was only killed about 25 minutes before this. So I don't know, would someone feel cold to the touch? Maybe a little bit, or just cold enough to where you know something is wrong. Maybe not ice cold, but colder than normal. Now, Cohen called 911 a second time at 6:11 after Jason found Lindsay. When officers arrived, they saw both men waving from the upstairs window and noted that Jason showed comparatively little visible emotion. And a lot of people talk about this. There's recorded interviews. They do a walkthrough of the house with Jason as part of the investigation where he's like explaining to police what happened. And this is all recorded. And, he is showing very little emotion. However, I don't think we can judge people on their reactions to something so tragic. Everybody reacts differently. And to be fair, like if you're in shock, even a lot of people who are very emotional people might not show a lot of emotion in that type of situation. And I'm already feeling like the people who believe that the Zailo family might be involved are going to be like, Kelsey, you're like really defending them. I'm not defending anyone. I think I have no idea who did this. I am trying to give both sides to every argument that we discuss, okay? I'm not defending anyone. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just trying to evaluate two sides of an argument. So once officers arrived at 1702 De Souza Place and confirmed what Jason and Cohen had found, the scene shifted quickly from a welfare check to a homicide investigation. And let me go back and say, the reason it was a welfare check at first was because, remember, Jason made that first 911 call before they got into the house. So the first 911 call was like, hey, my girlfriend's showing this house and like, we can't get in and the door's locked and something weird is happening. The second 911 call is they know that, Lindsay has been stabbed. But police were already on their way. So this has really shifted for the police since they first got that phone call. The Saanich Police Department was a relatively small municipal department, and they were policing a city of roughly 114,000 people at the time. And they suddenly found themselves running the most significant murder investigation in the Saanich Police Department history, with a victim who had no obvious enemies, no known connection to violent crime, and a crime scene that had been left almost entirely clean. There was no murder weapon at the scene. We're going to talk about the physical evidence that was found, or the lack thereof, I should say. There was very little for them to go off when it came to the scene itself. And I want to pause here for a second because there's a couple like big question marks in this story that I don't know that I put it in the script, but if I did, I apologize if I repeat it later. But there's so many questions about how this couple came to and from the house, because obviously they took this murder weapon with them, but Lindsay was stabbed 40 times. This was a brutal killing. And the question is wouldn't these people be covered in blood after doing this? Or if one of them did it, wouldn't they be leaving that house covered in blood? And there's not like a big trail of blood, leading to the backyard. No one reports seeing people covered in blood walking through the neighborhood. According to the witnesses who saw the couple talking to Lindsay outside of the house, they said that they saw the couple walking up to the cul-de-sac on foot. So there was no car parked in the driveway. There was no vehicle to go off of. But investigators do believe that there was at least a third person involved in this, a getaway driver of some sort. There were 3 fence boards behind the property in that, big privacy fence that were found kicked in, which opened a gap from the backyard onto Torquay Drive. And this is a street that the property backs onto. So investigators think that there was a getaway vehicle waiting there for them because, again, they are probably covered in fucking blood. People would have noticed if they had to walk down the street. So I guess I should say it's possible there was a third person, like a getaway driver. They also could have just parked that car there and then walked around and walked up to the house. But that's what I'm saying, guys, is like, this is so well thought out and there is so little information and evidence from the scene. And I don't know about you guys, but to me, the first thought that comes to mind when I'm hearing this, when it's a couple and there's so little evidence that it's so planned, was this a hit? But what's interesting is a hit makes sense with a lot of the evidence, with the crime scene, with what we know about how this was planned, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, at least to me personally, with how Lindsay was killed. Because again, she stabbed 40 times. And that's a rough estimate because some of these wounds are overlapping and it's difficult to tell. This, to me, when I hear 40 times, this seems like someone in a frenzy, someone emotional, someone angry, someone jealous, someone whatever, like rage. But if you were hired to do this and you don't know Lindsay, because, the witnesses said it didn't seem like Lindsay recognized these people, like they were introducing themselves, everything seemed normal. If you don't know Lindsay, if you were just hired to do this, why would you stab her 40 times? You wouldn't be filled with rage for this person. And the other thing isn't just how many wounds there were. It was where the wounds were, because they were concentrated on her chest, her face, and her head. They're in the face, which makes me sick to my stomach for her family. But it's an important point to bring up because it seems so personal. And on top of this, a lot of the wounds were focused on her chest, like her breast specifically. And she had actually recently had breast augmentation surgery. I couldn't find how recent, but it seemed like, within a few months prior to this. And the concentration of wounds in that specific area, plus to her face, it just kind of drives this theory that this wasn't a clean transactional hit. This was personal. This was driven by rage or possibly driven by jealousy. And I think that this case is so confusing because the manner in which Lindsay was killed, I feel like feels so mismatched to all of the planning that took place and everything else we know about this case. I see this as someone, especially when it's on her breast, like, again, not accusing Jason Zailo of being involved in this. I'm just saying, like, in a generalized statement of, a girlfriend is killed in this way, you kind of look at, is it this person's partner who did this to them? It seems like very purposeful. They're trying to destroy Lindsay's beauty. They're trying to take away her face. They're trying to take away, something that she had spent all this money on to, she felt, improve herself in some way. Is that driven by jealousy? And if this was a hit, if this was a hired hit, why would they do that? Or were they specifically, did someone specifically request that they do that? I don't know. Now, nothing was taken. Her wallet, her belongings, her cell phone, her keys, they're all still there. They're left untouched. There was no evidence of sexual assault, and canine units were used to search the scene, but they turned up very little. And this is part of the reason that, police believe the suspects didn't just walk away. The only fingerprints recovered from the house matched Cohen and Jason, and the fingerprints that were theirs in the house, they matched Cohen and Jason's stories. Like it made sense to, how they got in and where they said they went in the house and everything like that. Like it's not like, oh, there's a random fingerprint in the basement from Jason, which makes no sense because Jason never said he was in the basement. Like the fingerprints lined up with Cohen and Jason's story. But beyond these fingerprints, there was no DNA found and no other forensic trace of anyone being there, which again, Saanich police think that this shows these are people who had done something like this before. Now, witnesses who saw the couple that evening described the woman as white, somewhere between 35 and 40, with short blonde hair. And she was wearing, remember, that very distinctive dress. And I know I've already told you guys this, but I'm really trying to hone this in because, like I said, I think there are people out there who know who did this. But that distinctive dress was white, black, and bright pink. It was in a pattern that read as dated, even at the time, more early 90s than 2008. The man was white, around 6 feet tall, medium build, dark hair, dressed fairly nicely, including that light brown beige jacket. A composite sketch was drawn of the woman from the descriptions, but there was no sketch made of the man because, again, the witnesses only saw the back of the man. They only saw him from behind. Now, this composite sketch of the woman was not released to the public until roughly a year after Lindsay's murder. And this delay is highly criticized by the public. Why would the police even make the sketch and not release it when this could have been drawing leads? And they feel like this was a lost opportunity. And I do think I agree with them. Why would you not release this to the public and be like, does anyone know this woman? With that being said, if you look at this sketch, I don't know that anyone would have been able to identify someone based off of this sketch. It's not the best composite sketch out there, okay? Now, this was obviously a targeted attack on Lindsay. She was obviously the intended victim. This was not an opportunistic crime. I can't even speak today. It wasn't an opportunistic crime. This was someone wanted to kill Lindsay specifically, and they planned it down to every little detail. And the question is, who would want to kill Lindsay? Who would want her dead, and why? So naturally, police started with those closest to Lindsay and her loved ones. And obviously the first person to be looked into is Jason. Now, Cohen is very clear that Jason had nothing to do with this. Like what Cohen and Jason's stories are the same. I know there's a couple details that are wishy-washy, but I think that seems to me to be more like, mismatched reporting and stuff like that rather than, Cohen's like, well, Jason lied about this. Like there's none of that. So you have Cohen's account to really say Jason did not do this. Like, and I'm saying physically be the one to kill Lindsay. And I don't think he has any motivation to lie. He's not like really close friends with Jason. He just worked with him and he's like, yeah, we can go do, play hockey or go to dinner or whatever it was. But, some people still may not trust Cohen's account, and that's totally fine. But the point is like even the timeline itself kind of shows that it couldn't have been Jason who did this. Because obviously if Jason did it, Cohen is in on this because we know that they were together this whole time. So you could argue, okay, Jason and Cohen did this together, but there's a lot of questions with that. Number one, who was this couple that other third-party witnesses saw? You could argue, oh, the couple came and they left and then Jason and Cohen did this, but why would this couple never come forward and be like, yeah, that was us and we had nothing to do with this? But we also know based on that footage of Jason picking Cohen up and how far that place was from this house, that it seems like the timeline that Jason and Cohen are giving about when they arrive at the home seems to be accurate and true based on how long it would take you to drive from point A to the house. Now, interestingly, the day after Lindsay's murder, a woman with an accent very similar to the one that Lindsay described called a different Victoria area real estate agent, a woman named Jasmine Parsons. And the woman asked her to come list a home. Now, when Jasmine asked for the address of the home, the caller told her to forget it and just hung up. What's interesting is that Jasmine Parsons is Jason's ex-girlfriend. Was this the same woman? Could this be completely unrelated and whatever? We don't know. I don't think we will ever know. But I think that is very worth mentioning. Now, we are going to come back to Jason on and off throughout the rest of this. So do not worry. I am not done talking about Jason or the Zailo family. We are going to get there. But I kind of want to talk about other things that police were looking into that are kind of smaller blurbs in this story. And one of those is a man named Matt. This was Lindsay's ex-boyfriend. She had dated him for about 5 years before she dated Jason. I believe this was like her high school boyfriend. And by most accounts, this was a relationship that ended amicably. There was no bad blood between them or anything like that, by most accounts. Now, police did look into Matt, and they confirmed that he was roughly an hour away with his new girlfriend and her family at the time of the murder. So he had a solid alibi, and he was cleared very early on in the investigation. Now, Shirley, when she was interviewed by police, Shirley is Jason Zailo's mom. She tells the police that the day before Lindsay's murder, Lindsay had confided in her that she was afraid of Matt. She also told Dateline NBC later on that she and Lindsay went for dinner and they went on a walk after dinner. So this is the day before the murder, Friday night. And she said that Lindsay confided in her, my ex-boyfriend is scared, he's scaring me, and she's afraid of Matt. However, other people close to Lindsay really pushed back hard on that account, saying that Lindsay had actually been telling them that she really missed parts of her relationship with Matt and she wanted that kind of connection back. Like she was nostalgic for that type of relationship, that type of connection that she had with him. Not that she was afraid of him. She was telling other people the exact opposite. And she was directly contradicting, what Shirley is later saying Lindsay told her. Now, a lot of people point to this and say, well, Shirley is lying for some reason, and it must be because she's involved, or she thinks her son or knows her son is involved, and so she's trying to point the finger at Matt. Possibly. That could absolutely be the case. However, again, I'm going to give you both sides every argument that I can think of. Maybe Jason, for some reason, was feeling insecure about Matt. Maybe he had mentioned this to his mother, things aren't going well with Lindsay and I. Maybe she said something about Matt in an argument, like, I wish you were more like Matt. Who knows? And none of this is things people say happen. I'm just completely speculating, making up a scenario. But let's say something happened. Jason is feeling insecure about Matt, and it sounds like there's kind of a reason to, based on what she's telling other people. She kind of misses her relationship with Matt. Maybe he mentioned this to Shirley. Maybe Shirley brought it up to Lindsay, and Lindsay was like overcorrecting, be like, no, like nothing is going on with Matt. Actually, he freaks me out, whatever. So again, she could be lying about this. And if she is lying and Lindsay never said this, her only motivation could really be she knows she's trying to redirect the investigation, or maybe Lindsay was lying to Shirley, saying that she was scared of Matt. I could see that as a possibility. So yeah, I'm giving you both sides, but I also want you to keep accumulating these question marks in your head, all of these unanswered questions, because I do truly believe that when it comes to circumstantial evidence, the volume of it, the more circumstantial evidence there is, the more important it becomes, if you know what I mean. And I'm not saying there's circumstantial evidence pointing to Shirley. I'm just saying there's a lot of unanswered questions. And based on the true answers to those questions, which we probably cannot and will not get, there could be. Does that make sense? I don't think so, but whatever. We're going to move on. So on the night of December 22nd, 2007, Lindsay had gone out with her best friend, and the two came back to Lindsay and Jason's condo in the early morning hours. Jason was in the other room. They believed he was already asleep. And so it's like a late night with your bestie. They were having a heart-to-heart, and Lindsay tells her friend that she is unhappy and she was planning to leave Jason once certain deals closed. Now, I assume that means like real estate deals, probably because, she has to close these deals. She has to leave the job in order to leave this relationship, whatever it may be. And again, this is December 22nd. So this is less than 2 months before her murder. So she's saying this to this friend, having this heart to heart, thinking that Jason is asleep. However, he was not asleep. He was awake in the other room, and he was listening in, and he heard everything. I don't have all of the details on what was said or done, but what I do know is that his reaction frightened the friend badly enough that she left the condo on foot, with Lindsay chasing after her to catch up. Jason then called Lindsay roughly 30 times in a row, and when she didn't pick up, Jason called Shirley, his mother. Now, things did cool down after the holidays, and the couple seemed to reconcile. They went on a ski trip with Jason's family, and after the ski trip, Lindsay told people that, I've decided to give the relationship another shot. I was thinking about leaving, but I've decided now I'm going to stay. In his own interview with police, Jason described the relationship as great. He said, there was nothing wrong. I really loved her. Everything was great. And this is a characterization that sits uneasily next to what Lindsay had been telling other people, telling her father, telling her friends. People who knew her were like, no, it was very rocky. She was always kind of on the cusp of like, should I stay or should I go? Now, I am looking at my script, and I am not even halfway through, and I've been recording for almost an hour and a half now. So I am realizing in the moment that I must be really yapping a lot, and this is going to be a two-parter. I did get a couple comments last time we did a two-parter. I believe I forgot to put in the title of part one, like part one. So I'm going to do that this time. If for some reason it's not on there, literally please scream at me. I'm so sorry. But I will put part one. Part two will be coming out next week. And yeah, I don't know how I yapped for so long so far. We still have so much to go through. So don't form any solid opinions on this case yet if you have never heard it before. we've got a lot to get through next week. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening. Truly appreciate it. Remember to be respectful in the comment section of the family, the friends, the loved ones of Lindsay when you guys are theorizing or asking questions. All of those things I think are good things when done respectfully. So I think with that, court is adjourned for the day. Bye.